In this video, I'm going to go over the equals constraint with you in Autodesk Inventor. Now, the equal constraint is used to make different line segments or different circles the same size. So when we're talking about lines, it means the length of the line is the same. So I'm going to come up to my constraint panel here on the ribbon, and the equals constraint can be found in the bottom right corner. And if we left click on it to activate it, we just need to click the two pieces of geometry that we want to be equal to one another. So I'm going to select the line on the left and select my line on the right. You can see that the line on the right grew so that it's the same length as the line on the left. And we have that little symbol that pops up there saying these two lines are equal with one another. Now what you'll notice is that it did not change the angle of these lines because the equals constraint only looks at the size dimensions. It doesn't actually look at location or angle dimensions. So if I was to dimension the lengths of these lines now, we have 180.9 something for the first one and 180.9 something for the second one. And you'll notice as I place my second dimension, it pops up as a driven dimension or a reference dimension, because the computer already knows that it has to be the same length as my first line. If I was to change the length of my first line, let's say I made it 250, because of that equals constraint, you'll notice that the second line also grows to be 250 long. So let's take a look at this now with circles. So that's how we deal with lines with the equals constraint. Now, circles are measured by diameter. So when we place the equals constraint on these two circles, it will make them equal in diameter to one another. And notice again, it's not changing the location of these circles. It's not lining them up. It's just making them the same size. So again, if we dimension these two circles, the second one ends up being a reference dimension. And if I change the size of my first one, it changes the size of my second one to match. So the equals constraint is really handy when you have a sketch that has multiple, let's say, holes in it that all need to be the same size. Rather than dimension every single hole separately, you can use the equals constraint to just dimension the first one and then make all of the other ones equal to that first one. So that if you ever have to change the size of that hole, you just change one of them and all of the rest of them will update at the same time. Now arcs, well, we're going to look at my third example here with two different arcs. Arcs are measured in radius because it's not a full circle. So I'm just going to place the dimension on my first arc here. It says 76.9 something. And we're going to place an equals constraint between these two arcs. So I'm going to click on equals to activate it. I'm going to select my first arc with the dimension, select my second arc, and you'll notice that the second arc definitely shrank down quite a bit to match the size of this first one. And if I place a dimension on my second arc, it should be a reference dimension. It is. And we can see that it's the exact same size as that first one. So that's how we can use the equals constraint in our 2D sketches in Autodesk Inventor to make different pieces of our sketch geometry the same size as other pieces you want them to be equal to.